All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about dangerous misadventures south of the border, tequila poppers, and the legendary donkey show. Well, we did it, Chris. We survived another 4th of July, which for me now consists of really doing nothing, just barbecuing a couple of simple things in the backyard. It was just my wife and I, which was awesome, and binge watching Netflix. And then we have a fireworks show that takes place a couple miles away. But if you just sit on a little catwalk at our house and just look out the back window, you can see the whole thing. And so it's just sort of the laziest 4th of July ever. Oh, there's the fireworks show. Well, look at that. Now it's 9:40. Time to go to bed. The end. Right?
Ooh, got through another one. Yeah, you made it. You didn't lose a finger or a limb or anything like that. You know, it's like, well, see, I'm fortunate enough to live close enough to the beach where it's not an enormous commitment, right? So we try, like, say, yeah, we like to go to the beach on 4th of July, but again, without having to, you know, and you used to see all these people that would just get up, you know, at the crack of dawn and they'd load up their cars and they'd go down there and they'd spend literally all day. It's just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Certainly not now. But luckily fortunate enough to leave, you know, to live close enough to go, you know, got there by 9 and had breakfast burritos and hung out for a couple of hours. And it's like, okay, I think it's time to go, right? Before it gets completely insane. Just like, yeah, I don't want to be around all these people. I don't like people, right? It's like, I do not want to be in the middle of your traditional, you know, just 4th of July beach mess, right? So yeah, get home, grilled, the same thing. And I think, and I didn't even go to the effort that you did in watching fireworks, because I'm good. Okay, when it comes to the fireworks. And unfortunately we have this debate at my house every now and then, well, once a year maybe. I don't know about you, but I pretty much think that I've seen all the fireworks I need to see. I don't know if you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to see anything that go, that was great. That was the greatest fireworks show I've ever seen. I can't believe what they did. And I knew they do a lot of fancy stuff now with drones and whatnot, but not, you know, that's not really your local stuff, right? Your traditional 4th of July, that's like a big showy stuff at maybe an event. So it's like, yeah, I'm you know, I don't need, I've seen fireworks. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like a movie that you've seen 20 times. Like I don't need to watch. I know all the lines. I know how the fireworks go. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, we got through it. We survived. Yes, no injuries. Didn't have to import any fireworks, which I guess is good, right? Although I think we all did that. I don't know technically what we did was importing. I think there was probably a better term for what was, I think, maybe smuggling, I guess. Not that we were really smuggling, right? Not that we were selling them or, you know, distributing them. You know, if we had some, you know, what is that? The M20, the M80 was the big one, which was like a quarter stick of dynamite. Nobody was running around with a lot of M80s, but yeah, we had our fireworks and whatnot. So firecrackers.
That's the thing. There's most people kind of forget that there's two different things there going on 4th of July. There's a firecracker, right? That's something that's meant to make a really loud noise. The actual munitions aspect of 4th of July. And then there's the fireworks, which I would classify as something that makes a pretty color or does something, right?
Right.
You know, so back when you and I were kids, we might have been able to get a hold of firecrackers, but fireworks, anything that shot in the air and made pretty colors, here in California, that was almost impossible to get unless you were able to somehow talk your mom or your dad or somebody, a cousin or somebody that was visiting was from Arizona, right? Or someplace like that, or, you know, south of the border. But yeah. And you know what I noticed, Chris, you're exactly right. I've said to my wife 100 times, who cares? I've seen every firework there is. It has lost its luster. I can't pretend to be excited about fireworks. And nowadays, they don't even make big noises. I noticed that somebody somewhere must have said, hey, they're too noisy. Let's turn down the fireworks. So now I'm watching this super epic show next to the casino. and there's not making any noise when they go off. It's just, the same exact. There's the red one. Yep. There's the green one. Oh, there's the sparkly one that looks like a weeping willow tree. Oh, another red one. Oh, hey, look, another green one. Firework technology is stagnant. It's all about the drones these days, but I haven't seen a good drone show, but I'm excited for that. But Chris, you remember, right? Trying to get fireworks and how excited we were when we had a friend back in the 70s or 80s that was able to get a hold of these things that almost look like cartoon fireworks. Man, that was a big deal, right?
Well, again, like I do remember, like as far as like what you would call a box of fireworks, and there was, like you said, out of Arizona. My dad used to drive around a lot for travel, but again, he was in his car all over the Southwest. So sometimes, he would bring home these big boxes and they were essentially contraband because he bought them, and along the border, Arizona border or the California Mexico border, and it was like Red Devil. I remember was the one brand, and you'd have like sparklers and these ones called Piccolo Peaks or Peaks, I'm not sure, that would make a lot of noise. A couple other ones, and those were like we get out in the street for 15 minutes and we lose our minds. And then some cranky neighbor, some Mr. Wilson-esque kind of old guy would say he was going to call the police or something like that. So that was our annual stuff. Again, unless, like you said, somebody brought some in. And again, and usually the seasonal part, right? So 4th of July, maybe New Year's, but unless somebody came from Mexico, right? Because you could get those all the time in Mexico. And, you and I both lived, obviously living in San Diego, conservatively where we lived, 35-minute drive down to the border, right?
That's
Give or
it.
take.
Yep.
So, and although I didn't ever really go there for firecrackers, and I don't think you did either. Or did you? Why did you go there, Jeff?
We would, there was two things going on. There was the daytime Tijuana, and then there was the nighttime Tijuana. So if we're talking about the daytime Tijuana, that would be once every few years. Your mom and dad might get you in the car, and maybe that was when your aunts and uncles were visiting from out of town, or you had relatives, and we all went down to Tijuana. And by gosh, we were the whitest of the white tourists that ever went down there, with the big sombreros and, eating the tacos and buying every stupid touristy thing you could buy, the ponchos. They had a big thing with ceramics for some reason down there for the tourists.
I don't think they were actually ceramic. I think they were more like plaster of Paris. But you could get like a pig.
Okay, the pig cowboy, but there was also a chimpanzee in a striped bathing suit riding on a surfboard. That was a plaster of Paris one. And then for some inexplicable reason, the one that I brought home one year, get this, a skull wearing a German World War II helmet.
Oh.
No idea what that was. What is that, a dead Nazi? I have no idea what that was supposed to represent, but somehow it looked really cool. So I brought home a dead German soldier, I guess, plaster of Paris. And then the coveted, and Chris, maybe you got one of these when you were visiting, the coveted switchblade comb.
Yes.
Huh? I don't know if you saw those down there, but Chris, it looks like a switchblade. And when you click it open, what is it? It's a comb.
Oh, I had one of them.
Man, that just blew my mind back then.
You actually, if you went to the right place, you actually could buy a real authentic switchblade. You could buy brass knuckles. You could buy like a butterfly knife. Nunchucks, you could actually buy them. And there was no way you could actually, I think, smuggle those in. If you could, or if you got caught, again, imagine going down with your parents and your brothers and your aunt and uncle and your cousins, and then Jeff gets caught trying to bring back, brass knuckles, which would have probably been a little bit of an issue. But those things you could buy. The switchblade comb was a hoot. The clothing, the pigs, everything. They had the weird, I think they also had pharmacies where I know at the time people would go, I think still do. They go and get, because just like in Canada, the drugs are, prescription drugs are cheaper down there. And then there was a really cool supermarket called Calimex which I guess people, same thing. It's like, your dollar would go a little farther. But again, and that was, and there was a, shout out to our old friend Abby, whose dad worked for a big department store called Dorian's, which was like the sort of the hoity-toity sort of, department store of Tijuana. So people would go to Dorian's. But that's all the daytime stuff, right? Although I have to throw in too, I actually did eat at Caesar's restaurant that just recently supposedly celebrated the 100th anniversary of creating the Caesar salad, I guess in 1924. Actually been there. It's a really nice restaurant, like a, white tablecloth kind of place. And you don't think of, Italian restaurants in Tijuana. I also have really good Chinese food down there, allegedly. I did see, as a kid, I got a daytime trip. Because speaking the opposite of the Phil family, having on my dad's side, having a family who kind of knew the ins and outs of Tijuana, had relatives there and even further south. I got to go to the bullfights in Tijuana, which
okay.
All I really remember I remember essentially what my mom's fingers and palms of her hands look like, because almost immediately she was covering my eyes with the gore and the carnage that came along with a bullfight. But I got to go to a bullfight, which was, I guess I'll check that one off the bucket list, right?
Yeah, well, that's a weird thing to have on your bucket list, number one, but okay. Number two, I would like to point out for everyone listening who has listened to maybe all of our episodes, but going back a little bit to when we were talking about horror films back in the 70s, let's please understand that Chris's mom didn't think it was appropriate for him to see some of the details of a bullfight happening live. But somehow 8-year-old Chris was allowed to go into the motherfucking theater and watch The Exorcist from start to finish. So I would like to understand the strange dichotomy there in parenting techniques. Was that your dad versus your mom? Is that possibly what it was?
I think it's ignorance of the law is no excuse. I don't think she had any idea that was happening.
Okay.
I think that's probably why.
Okay.
Because I don't think I could have seen The Exorcist and a bullfight in the same time frame. So
nobody's saying see them at the same time. I'm just saying there's some weird standards here. One or the other, man.
I'll have to ask her about that next time. And we may have to bring her on to explain the paradox that is bullfights versus The Exorcist.
If seeing a bull getting hurt is something that you shouldn't see, right? I mean, it isn't. Seeing a bull get hurt like that it's pretty horrific, really. But The Exorcist, come on, man. I realize that's make believe, but good God, that is some scary stuff there.
Right.
Well, cool. So yes, so there was a big difference between daytime Tijuana and Mexico. Lot of fun, really cool to visit. We always got to see the zebras down there, right, Chris? Which were basically painted donkeys. They painted the donkeys down there to look like a zebra, so you got to take your picture with that. But the coolest thing was when Chris and I were teenagers, not 21 yet. How old did we have to be? I think we had to be 18, right?
You had to be 18, but
yeah,
I didn't wait. We didn't wait till we were 18. No, or even they didn't enforce it. They didn't check.
Yeah.
And let's face it, if you had, if it was a mixed group, if you had a couple of, pretty high school age girls in your group, you got welcomed right in, right? Because it was just like, yeah, everybody come on in. Right. So, because we definitely weren't even close to being the legal age. Right. And, and we were maybe close to being, again, the 18-year-old, which at the time was pretty common for a lot of foreign countries. I think it still is.
Well, so the thing is, for anybody that doesn't understand what we're getting at here, at nighttime, right, we would just disappear. We would get in our carpools, right? Our parents just assumed it was another night out with our friends.
Right.
And we would take as few cars as possible, jam in as few cars as possible, sometimes way beyond capacity, right? You'd be in a car where the back seat was supposed to hold 3 people. You might get 5 or 6 people jammed back there.
Of course.
Obviously, no seatbelts. Goes without saying. Usually somebody is sitting in someone else's lap in the passenger seat, and it's a clown car, basically. And we would all go down to Tijuana, right? And man, it was so cool because, like we just said, technically you had to be 18. A lot of us had fake IDs. Many of us, it didn't even matter because we looked older, or to Chris's point, there were enough cute girls in your party that they didn't care. And we could drink really just unchecked all night long. How we ever got back in one piece, I will never know. How we even made it back over the border is a mystery to me. A bunch of kids as white can be, just the biggest boneheaded looking touristy kids you've ever seen. Right? Gullible, naive, overly confident, with wads of cash coming out of their pockets, looking to spend money in Tijuana. I want everyone to really think about that right now. So that's what it was. And somehow we all made it back and everything was fine. But holy moly, was that just sort of, an agreement, I guess, based on tourism, right? The laws of tourism said, don't kill these kids on their way in or out.
Right.
I guess.
Well, I mean, and when again, looking back, it's kind of one of those things that not only we pull it off, I don't even know how we planned it, right? Because it's like it's not like we'd send out a text and say, okay, everybody, we're meeting in Alpha Beta at 7:30 and we'll figure out, and always argue on like, hey, I drove last time. I don't want to drive. It's like, my car's too small. I don't have enough gas, whatever. My dad will kill me if something happens. So eventually the same people sort of drive all the time. But so again, so somehow we plotted it, we planned it, we went, again, we could get down there, like you said, we lived close enough, again, driving down there, parking on the U.S. side of the border, right? Because we were ignorant, but I wouldn't say we were stupid, right? I don't think for the most part anybody said, hey, let's drive across the border, right? And see, because nothing bad would happen if that were the case, right? So we park on the U.S. side, we'd walk across, jump in a cab that was like, they would usually cost $1 a head, right? And I can remember some of my friends, and I will not name names, who wanted to bargain with, like, you don't want to pay $1? I don't want to walk. You know what I mean? They were literally trying to, bargain with these guys. So buck ahead, a quick ride down to Avenida Revolución, right, which is where all the cheesy shops were, and all the vendors and all the bars. So a quick, cab ride to Revolución, and we were going to start our night at one of the handful of establishments, fine establishments that welcomed us with open arms. And again, we could get down there, roughly speaking, by, again, if it's conservatively, so let's say we were down there by about 8:15. If we had to, and somebody had a 12:30 or 1 a.m. curfew, we could make it back, right? Provided something bad didn't happen.
Easily.
You could be down there. And again, we had no designated drivers. Again, we were driving, like I said, packing 6 or 7 people into a car that seated 4. Traditionally, even to be 2 people riding shotgun, the driver, and then maybe 4 or 5 in the back. And again, I can think of I think my favorite place was probably Long Bar, which was essentially just a dirty, grimy, broken glass, spilled beer and cigarettes, on the floor. It was called Long Bar because it had a super long bar.
Very clever.
And, we sit at some grimy table or booth, drink pitchers of beer, and order pitchers of beer. And I can just real quick, because I can remember the first time we did it, I went with, I think, 4 of my other friends. And I know we had at least one trip down there together, but I remember just sitting there, and it was like we had just landed on the moon. We sat there and we ordered a pitcher of beer, and they were bringing it to us. And it was, again, we all had stupid, dumb, shitting grins on our face because we couldn't believe how our lives had just changed at that moment.
For sure. Absolutely. And I remember the Long Bar. Now, the Long Bar was an interesting choice, Chris, because the Long Bar was less touristy. Mm-hmm. That was not one of those bars that had a ton of dopey looking kids like us. That was a little more for the locals and a little more of a cool place to go. So hats off to you for being able to pull that off.
Right. It was right there in the middle. So you could kind of start there. It was cheap. And again, my same friends whose names it probably will come out at some point, who didn't want to spend $1 on a cab ride. That I think that's where the drinks were cheap. So a pitcher of beer was literally like $3, and I think that's where we would kind of start, and before we would begin and move on somewhere else.
I know your group of friends pretty well, Chris, back then, and I already know who you're talking about that was super cheap and could not spare an extra dollar. So yeah, we won't mention their names because I almost think getting shamed 35, 40 years later is one of the worst things ever, right? But yeah, they were cheapskates indeed. And I love the idea, by the way. This is a cab driver, by the way, that is responsible for taking you safely to your very first destination in a country where anything can happen. And
Literally.
you're already dicking them around. Your opening to them is to be a dick over $1.
Right.
I think that's a smart tactic
Great
on the
strategy.
part of your cheap ass friends, Chris.
Yes.
But my favorite place to go was not favorite, but one of the more obvious places we would go would be Margarita Village. That was just what it said. A village filled with margaritas, everyone. But that's where all the touristy kids would come in to that bar, and it was connected to a whole bunch of other bars. But again, keep in mind, we are kids that weren't used to being able to get alcohol that easily. It was always a real trick. And to Chris's point, to be able to finally sit down, take money that you earned or stole or begged or borrowed to get, and be able to lay it out and have someone say, yes, I know that you're 18 and I'm still going to serve you in this grown-up location and you're allowed to get drunk right now. It was one of the most freeing things. You really felt like an adult. You really felt like I finally have arrived, right? And then they would have the cool gimmicky guys. Remember, Chris, the guys that would come up and they would have double gun belts across their chest, the bandoleros, and there would be shot glasses in there, thank God, instead of bullets. And they would do the tequila poppers, right? And the tequila popper was, they would sneak up behind you, right? They would pour the popper in and mix it with soda.
It was just tequila and 7-Up in a shot glass.
Tequila and 7-Up, which is perfect. And then they would, from behind, they would force your head back and make you do the shot and then rub your face with some kind of a wet rag and then say, Tequila, right? And then you would just continue. And then you would do sneak attacks on your friends who didn't expect it, right? And these guys, again, they would come up from behind, Tequila, and oh my gosh, the levity. Oh my Lord. That was something else, buddy. I'll tell you.
And, because the intricacy of a shot glass with a shot of tequila and a little bit of 7-Up, and then put wax paper on top with a rubber band, and then would slam it down. And yes. And the thing is, sending them to your friends across the table, sending them to friends at another table. The baller move, or the move is like, hey, I'm going to send one to that girl over there who I don't know, right? Who is from another high school. And we're going to see, so it was it was a way of like, hey, this is, an interesting, and in retrospect, it was all good, harmless fun. Just a bunch of underage teenagers drinking excessive amounts of alcohol in a foreign country. I mean, like you said, what could go wrong? Right. And I think we did see it. I remember seeing fights. Right. I remember seeing people getting arrested. I remember, again, or panicky kind of bad things happening, along the lines of, again, never heard of anything like really, really bad accidents or stuff like that. We did have one of our friends. We came back one time. We came back to drive across, took the cab back and we're on the bridge on the U.S. side. And somebody had gone and maybe they didn't like all the kids going down there, had slashed a bunch of tires on cars, just randomly slashed tires. And her tires were slashed. And it was just like, well, everybody who came with Pat, I don't know how you guys are going to get home, because what could we do? Right. I think they had to figure out another way of getting, that's when they had to kind of come clean, and somebody's going to have to call an adult and see how we can, get out of this. For the most part, everything was, whether it was Margarita Village, whether it was another one called Rita. I don't know if you remember that one, which was kind of cool because you went down, it was kind of like a basement kind of style. You went down a flight of stairs, and that's where the bar was, and loud and sweaty and hot, not a lot of poorly ventilated, but the alcohol was cheap and it was full of U.S. teenagers. So it was kind of like, and again, I think we saw these things happen. It was kind of like spring break, right? all these things that you would hear about, but it was every weekend, right? It was any random weekend that, it could have been Mazatlan, it could have been, Puerto Vallarta, it could have been any of those places, but it was right on the other side of the border, which,
Yeah.
again, convenient for us. At the time, I found out later because of my brother who worked for the customs service. It was the busiest port of entry in the world.
Man, back then, like you said, it was just this incredible adventure. And of course, it came with urban legends,
Of course.
right? Stuff that you and I probably never actually saw really or experienced, but everybody had a friend who knew somebody who says that they experienced it. But one of them would have been the donkey show, the legendary donkey show, right? And
Right.
I'll let the audience members put two and two together there as to what would occur at a donkey show. Let's just say, wow. Let your imagination run wild there. Never, ever even knew somebody who had even allegedly seen one, but maybe a friend of a friend who knew somebody says that they saw somebody or knew somebody that had seen them. And then, of course, there was the legendary Bambi Club. I could only assume what took place at the Bambi Club. I had heard of it. I think another one was La Unicornia or El Unicornio or something like that. I'm sure I just slaughtered the name, but whatever happened there, I can only assume, right? I guess it was a strip club or something. Somehow my 18-year-old self never quite made it to either of those legendary locations, Chris. I don't know if you ever did or if you knew someone who did.
You seem to, for someone who never made it to any of those locations, you seem to know an awful lot about them.
Oh, I knew all about them, but beyond that, we didn't know anything about them, right? We didn't have the internet, so all you knew was what people said. And there was always somebody in your group that, oh, we're going to go there. Or I think that we're going to, that cab says he knows how to get there. Oh, yeah, we're going to. And it never happened. No one ever did that. I mean, not that I know of, but.
Well, first of all, let's clarify. Those donkeys were not the aforementioned donkeys painted to look like zebras. These donkeys had a completely different function.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they were the same donkeys. I have no idea.
As far as the Bambi Club, I think you could chalk it up to there was always somebody in the group, and if there was that night, let's say you went down where there were just a group of guys, and if you didn't, meet any, girls from another high school, let's say, or other girls that you knew that happened to be down there, the desperation would tend, and I think that even happens up here, right, where guys end up at a strip club because they're just a bunch of guys that haven't done anything. It's like, wow, the night's almost over. Let's go here. I know people that went. I never did, but I knew enough about it, and I think there may be one or two occasions, and again, I'm not naming names, not in this episode, but where I have said, no, we're not going there, right? I think it was proffered. I think it was suggested, but it's like, you know what? I'm not that desperate. If I get that desperate, I think it's just time to go home and watch HBO, okay, or something on Cinemax. There's really no reason to go to a place. Again, I think even the most irresponsible 17 or 18-year-old in Tijuana realized, you know what? I think I'm good. I think I'm not going to press my luck anymore. And I think maybe it's time for that, cab ride back to the border. And then again, you definitely don't want to bark because then you don't want to have, you need to get that cab ride back. So you don't want to alienate any cabbies. But I think there was that time where it's like, okay, we're good. We don't need to go to the Bambi Club. I will stop and eat a hot dog on, from a vendor on the street, wrapped in bacon, that was again $1 maybe. And that in itself was probably not the best idea, because I need to, but again, how one of those, well, I've been drinking and I'm hungry. What's the closest, cheapest, most accessible food? It's the guy standing right on the curb. Right. So that was not probably but I don't remember ever getting sick, at least off of those. When I didn't feel great, the next day after a night in Tijuana, I don't think it was the hot dog. Let's just put it that way.
Well, yeah. And I think we all did that. We all took a chance and somehow, ended up okay. But when it comes to the strip clubs and places like that where legendary activities would take place, my understanding, my feeling is that those were a little bit further outside of the tourist zone, and you could almost sense it when you were in a cab. I feel like we've gone too far. Like there was something like a sixth sense or something. The hairs in the back of your neck would start to stand up if you felt the cab driver had gone just a little too far into the zone. You're just like, I think we better circle back now. I don't know if we should go any further.
Wait. Isn't the border that way? Where are we going? What do you mean this is a shortcut? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And God knows where you are in a foreign country without any sort of communication tools. But yeah, I think they're dead. Somehow, we didn't use the best judgment by going down there, but somehow that judgment, there at least one person bubbled up. At least somebody was sensible, right? Somebody had the common sense to say, yeah, it's not a good idea. I think it's time to go home.
Yeah, there was always you're right. There was always somebody that did have that sort of fail safe feeling in the back of their head of, hey guys, that guy was almost like your reserve parachute or something. It's just like, let's abort now. We're done. All right, time to regroup. Time to head back. We always just somehow knew when it was time to do that. And most of us, I don't think we ever left any comrades behind. God forbid if you ever did. But we all somehow made it back over the other side and back home in time for more hijinks the next day. But Chris, what did we have the next day? Most of us had the giant 8x10, almost looked like a old-fashioned, black and white photo that they probably developed, in a little photo lab in the back of these bars. But it was very common for us back then to take home a trophy, and the trophy was a photograph. And you would have one of these photographers that was at the big bars take a picture of you and your group, and everybody would always be crammed into a little booth. You'd always have, 12, 15 people crammed into a booth that was supposed to hold 5 or 6 people. Everyone's stacked up on top of each other. They snap the photo, and by the time you leave, you've got this wet, wobbly photo in a frame, cardboard frame, ready to commemorate the event. And God knows what it cost back then, but it was worth it, man. And Chris, I think you mentioned you may even still have a couple of those.
I've got 2 or 3 of those. Somehow they made it back, right? Because it was not like, I'm going to carry this stupid, and it was still kind of wet because it was hilarious. They used like those old timey cameras where it was like the guy was like holding the camera in one hand and then like a big flash attachment with the other, and it would flash and it was like smoke would go because he used like a flash bulb. So, and then
exactly.
They had this lab. I don't think it was really a lab. I think it was probably a closet attached to the bar or something where they had...
Chris, it might have been a lab, but maybe photography wasn't the only thing they did back there.
Wasn't a photography lab. Okay, duly noted. They didn't take it to Fromex or one of those places that had like an hour photo play, back in the 1 hour photo processing, which was amazing technology back in those days. But, and it almost, it had that sepia tone to some of them, right? So it looked like it looked like something you got at Knott's Berry Farm when you went with your family and you all dressed as cowboys or something like that. It had
exactly.
It had that sort of aesthetic. But yeah, I've got a couple, 2 or 3 of them. They're hilarious. And there's one, that 2 of them are normal. It's like, these are all friends. There's one that was taken with like, who are these people? I guess we were drinking with them at the time, because half of them, these people, I probably didn't even remember who they were the next day, let alone decades later.
So true. Yes. Who was that guy? The randoms. There was always at least 2 or 3 randoms in that photo. And a week later, you're like, I barely who?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, but absolutely the whole, the whole process of that, and that would be the souvenir. And again, the funny part about that, and again, maybe today's generations or the subsequent generations could relate, because that wasn't a picture you actually would, for the most part, would go home and put on your wall in your bedroom, right? Because it wasn't, it's like, this is the secret one that I'm going to put next to my dirty magazines or something like that, in between my mattress and my box spring or something along those nature, where I can hide stuff. And because just like kids don't want their parents looking at their phone or somebody's Instagram or something like that today, because you don't want, and that's probably the best part. Again, looking back, we didn't have to worry about that, right? Nowadays, kids can't go anywhere without ending up in the background or the foreground of a picture of some sort of hijinks. And I think we're all pretty fortunate that technology didn't exist because there were no witnesses other than the people that were there, and that maybe the two or the handful of times. I think I was in a lot of pictures, but obviously I don't have all the ones I was in. Probably the same ones, right? You're probably there's who knows. We're in some pictures. So maybe we're that guy. Maybe we're like
Yeah.
maybe the next people were like, who are these guys? Why are they in this picture? And they couldn't figure it out because we were drinking with them at the time. It's maybe we're that guy in somebody's picture all these years later that they show their kids and they go, yeah, this is my friend Steve, and this is Carrie, and this is Tracy, and I don't know who these guys are. They were just some random guys.
Whenever I see one of those photos, and I know this is a very strange comparison, but it always reminds me of the very end of the movie The Shining, when the camera kind of zooms in on the wall and you see the photo of all the different people that were living it up at the bar, at the hotel back in the day, and of course Jack Nicholson is somehow superimposed into an old photo. Don't ask me what the comparison is, but when I look back at these Tijuana photos and I see them posted online, you and I, again, we've mentioned this before, we still hang out a few times a year with our small group of high school friends, and a lot of those guys have some of these photos, right? And it is just so funny to look back on it, because just like The Shining, it almost doesn't look like you were really there, but somehow you were, and you're trying desperately to remember that night. And again, you're seeing other people in that photo, to your point, that you just don't even recognize. And as your brain tries to piece together what may or may not have happened, I don't know, it just gets fuzzy and funny and weird. But for those of you that grew up in San Diego or maybe even Los Angeles back in the 70s and 80s, I guarantee somewhere in a bucket or a Tupperware tin or a paper bag in your mom's closet, or maybe even your closet, is one of those photos. It'd be really funny to see a whole website dedicated to that. I would love to pour through about 100 of those just to see if I recognized anyone.
Create a social media account and see if the submissions you would get would probably be pretty interesting, I would say. But here's the thing. I guess here's my question for you, though. So going down there, and I think we may all have stories. I remember when, at least my son growing up, and probably you're the same way with you, where they're like, yeah, it's like you have these stories, but you have a point where it's like some of my best stories, some of my favorite stories, I'm not ready to share them with the next generation yet, because I don't want them, copying that behavior, or again, because it's all these years later, somehow improving or expanding on that behavior. So these are, sort of like, but you look at it and it all seemed harmless. And in retrospect, it was really dumb and reckless, right? And it was really to the point of like, yes, because I think there probably are some horror stories out there of people who, some bad things happen and people got hurt or got into accidents or people got lost or got into fights or whatever. But, we were fortunate. But I guess my question to you, or one of my questions, is just like, I don't regret it. But again, I wouldn't want to, as a parent, I didn't want to see my kid doing that, right? It's like, yeah, I'd appreciate, let's just be a little smarter, right? Things are different now.
Yes, it was dumb, but it was no dumber than the other 1,000 things we did back then, right? And I think that's really the whole theme of this show, and really the whole entire interesting aspect of the quote unquote Gen Xers, right, is the fact that we were exposed to a lot of unnecessary, unsafe situations. And we talked about it before, what might even be considered neglect as quote unquote latchkey kids. And being able to light off Roman candles and Chinese flowers and throw M80s at each other and shoot bottle rockets at each other and splintered bike ramps and road rash and all the other things that we got involved in. Was going to Tijuana back then and getting drunk and somehow coming back dangerous? Probably. But, to your point, not nearly the way that it would be today. And I think back then it was just sort of this is how that city makes money, and it's expected that everyone's just going to mostly be cool about this. And, you know, there you go. Commerce, I guess, was kind of like the saving grace, right? That helped us out back then. But yeah, lots of dumb decisions for sure. And no, you would never want your kid doing that today. No, for sure. No way, man.
Right. And again, like you said, riding in the back of a pickup truck, not wearing a seat belt, right? Not wearing a bike helmet.
Well, that was dumb. There's no way around that one, Chris. That's just fucking stupid. There's no way around that. I have no excuse, and there's no way to sugarcoat that. That was really, really stupid and a lot of fun.
Yes. I looking back and that I rode back in the back of a truck from Palm Springs after spring break one year for the 2.5, 3 hour ride in the back of a pickup the entire way. Yeah, pretty dumb. But let me ask you, it's like, okay, so maybe it wasn't dumb. Again, seemed like a good idea at the time, and had a lot of fun. Have memories because we're still talking about it today, or we can recall it pretty easily. But okay, so it wasn't dumb. It was reckless. It was careless. It's what kids did or what kids do, right? Can you think though? It's like, what's something that you really did that was dumb? Can you think of anything that you did that, looking back on it, it's almost like, oh, Jesus, I can't believe it. I can think of a couple of things, one off the top of my head, because again, it's like as an adult, as you gain perspective over the years and you look back, it's like, holy crap, why did I do that? That was really stupid. Right. And again, we can all think of like, yes, we didn't have designated drivers, and yes, we didn't want to wear seat belts. And yes, maybe you did push the limits of how many tequila poppers you had. And, people can get really sick, or people can get alcohol poisoning, or whatever happens. Can you think of something that sticks out that was like, man, that was dumb? One thing, again, there's a handful of things that you may think of like, yeah, that was, again, stupid or kind of reckless. But can you think of any one thing that, boy, that was dumb? Like, what's the dumbest thing you did?
You're talking about specifically when I was down in Tijuana?
Just in general, just in that time frame, just in that time frame and that part of your life and your development.
Chris, I can't narrow it down. In fact, I think that on a future episode, I think that's a great topic, is doing our top 10, or at the very least our top 5 really, really stupid things that we did that in retrospect, there was no excuse for it. And holy shit, are we lucky to be alive, or we're lucky that things turned out the way they did. I have so many of them, I don't know where to begin. And most of them start with me being a smartass, and then somehow things go sideways. So yeah, that's a whole other episode, man. Let's get into it. Yeah, for sure.
We'll save that for a future episode. So listeners, be on the lookout for that, because you're right. It's probably a little more preparation, and probably a little more, shouldn't have been an off the cuff question, but this one's, but yeah, there probably might be, if we do top 5, there'll probably be something, a south of the border sort of anecdote in there, let's just say. But all right, we'll put that, we'll put that down the road.
Well, it's been a long time coming. We've had many, many people that listen to the show that either know us or grew up in this area that have been begging us to recount and recall and reminisce about the Tijuana escapades that we all enjoyed. So hopefully for those listening, we did it justice. Obviously, we could make a Tijuana part 2, part 3, and part 4 as we reminisce. But I get the feeling, Chris, that when we do the episode, our top 5 stupidest things that we've ever done, I'm sure the subject of visits to Tijuana is going to come back again, probably to haunt us. But hey, man, great job. I thought this episode was a lot of fun thinking back on all those near misses and great times that we had. A lot of them very fuzzy memories, but fun nonetheless. What do you think?
Right. I think so. And again, you mentioned it. We actually had people say, talk about Tijuana. Well, we talked about it. And if we didn't cover your exact experience, send us an email, nicepullpod@gmail.com, nicepullpod@gmail.com. We'd love to share it anonymously, or if you want to attach your name to it. But I tend to think that most of the stories that we shared, everybody's like, yeah, that was kind of my experience too. And if there was something that was much worse, I don't know if we want to share that, but we'll give you that opportunity. But yeah, that was, like I said, I everything, I can see it. I can see Long Bar. I can see, going down the stairs in Rio Rita and their buckets of beers. I can see Margarita Village and the sign that I think, the sign that was on the corner that was like, it was kind of stood, it was like a beacon calling us to go right down there and get into that. Okay, you did the cheap beer at the crappy bar, go to Margarita. I can see it all. I can visualize it. And you can't tell right now, but it's brought a little tear to my eye because it's just like, those were some great times, and we survived them, and we survived them all.
Well, for sure, man. All right. Well, hey, from 4th of July to tequila poppers, here is to America. How's that?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome, Chris. Look forward to the next episode. Until next time.
Till next time, Jeff.